Hello. So in this second Laravel Fundamentals video, we're going to be having a look at the M in MVC, our models, or our data. So there are a few approaches you could take when developing a big application that has lots of different parts, like essentially what we're doing and any kind of database-driven web application will be. And the approach that I would recommend, or at least the approach I'm going to be taking here, is to start by thinking about your data, setting up your database, making sure that all works. We'll be using a tool called Tinker, which comes with Laravel. Make sure all that works, all your relationships are set up and they're working, and then build your front end for users to actually interact with that data. So I'm continuing on. If you've watched the previous video, it's the same application. There's not much I've done here. I've just messed around with some roots to explain that. One thing I have changed is that I have, because we're going to be working with a database today, I have made sure my .env file, my environment file here, has got the correct database username and password for my database. If you're using homesteads, they will be this, homestead secret, but this is going to be different depending on what development environment you're working in. As a best practice, this is the .env file is not a file you would have in your version control. Because this is like, if you give it to someone else, if you give this project to someone else, they've got to set up their own kind of configuration stuff here. We're going to start, like a lot of today is going to be done through using Artisan, Artisan is just a PHP file. I can open it and it's just PHP, but it's an amazing tool that comes with Laravel, and I think it's one of the really powerful things that the framework has. So to create a model, I'm going to use an Artisan command, which is, I'm just getting some details up there. So the Laravel command I need is PHP Artisan make :model. So there's a bunch of different makes, so we'll be able to like make controllers using this. But for now, we're going to make the model. We're going to start with a capital letter, so I'm going to do Pokemon, and then with an option -m. Now, what the -m option does is it also creates a migration. And I mean, you could create the model without a migration, but if you're creating a model that's going to be in your database, which you almost certainly are, you're going to need a migration, and I'll explain what a migration is in a moment. So this is just setting up some files. When that's done, I can show you. So are any of those ready? No. So while this is just kind of ticking away. Oh, there it's done. So that's created two files. It's created a file in our app folder called Pokemon, and this is our model class. And so when we're working in our web application, like eventually, we're going to be using this class to access the model, access everything that's in our database, access a single version of this model, a single row in the database. The other thing it's created is we go to database migrations, we have a create Pokemon table migration. And interestingly, it hasn't. So there's some interesting stuff to do with how Laravel pluralizes things. So the convention is, if I have a animal model, it will create a table of animals. But I guess with Pokemon, it's recognized that the correct pluralization of Pokemon is Pokemon. It's not Pokemons. So that's kind of interesting. And that's another reason why I would suggest creating the model with this -m, because if you create it, one way you might do this is you might create the model and then you would create this migration, and you might get the name of the table wrong. And one of the key things to remember when using a framework, particularly Laravel, is you need to follow the conventions that the framework wants you to follow. And one of those is the way that things are pluralized. So by doing make model -m, it's creating this migration for you. So what is a migration? Now, the migrations are how we're going to set up our database, or more correctly, how Laravel is going to do it. Now, you might be used to just working with SQL, and you might think, right, I'm making my web application with PHP, and I'm just going to type out some SQL statements and create my tables, create my relationships. That's not a good idea. If you do that kind of thing, like you're going to type those commands and then they're lost. It could lock you into some bad database design. It's not going to be easy to undo changes. And the way your database is set up wouldn't be in your version control. And your database is going to be a key part of your design and your implementation. So we need to have a way that we can, add new things, test them, and if things don't work, go back and correct them. And we want it to be part of the version control. And we want to be able to give this project to someone and for them to be able to just run a command and it all works. Like imagine if you're deploying this to a server, you don't want to have to have a database file that you're sending around with your implementation. That's not very good practice. So what these migrations are is they're essentially PHP functions. You can see they've got a date, and then essentially what they do, there's two that have already been created for us when we created the project in default, which is create users table and create password reset table. When we do authentication, we'll look at those in detail, but just know that they were ones that were created automatically. Let's have a look at the one that we just created, the create Pokemon table. So it extends the migration class. Most of the things that are created will extend kind of base classes that are part of Laravel. So it's got two functions. It's got an up function. It's got a down function. You can see the up function. It's got schema create Pokemon. So this is actually talking to the database, and it's creating a Pokemon table. And by default, it's putting in big increments, which is going to be our primary key, and timestamps. These are two things that Laravel expects everything to have those. So it just puts them in by default. And that's our up, which means we're actually creating that table. And then we've got this other function down, which does the opposite. So if Pokemon has been created, it will actually drop the table. And so we could call up if we wanted to perform this migration, and down if we want to revert it. And this file can be in our version control, and we can do all the amazing things we can do with version control. So what we need to do now, we've got our migration, we've got our model. We now want to tell Laravel what this model has in it. And we do that actually by editing the migration file. So one thing is worth mentioning actually is the order these are run. In fact, I'll mention that when we actually do the migration. So we can do that by using this table method here. So it's essentially a blueprint that's coming into this function. So what we can do is we can add, tabbing's being a bit awkward. So table, and we're going to want to add a string, which is going to be the Pokemon's name. I'm not going to so I'm going to put a few things here to show how it all works. Table. Let's have an integer. And the integer is going to be the HP of the Pokemon. And then we want what's the color thing called? It's the type. So we're going to go table. This is going to be a string and type. Okay, so we've got some information. These are essentially our columns in our database. Okay, and I can save that. So I've saved that. And then what we can do is we can actually run the migration. That's all we need to do. And the way we run a migration is it's an artisan command again, and it's simply migrate. And what this will do is it will run each of our migrations. So you can see it's actually, it's got here migration, migrated, create users table, create passwords reset, and create Pokemon table. The order it does these migrations in is based on the date time at the front of this name. And you need to be aware of that because there are some cases when we start to add relationships between our models that you will need certain tables to be created before other ones. So, for example, we might have, what we'll eventually going to have is we'll have Pokemon trainers, and Pokemon trainers will have Pokemon. So there's going to be a relationship there and a foreign key set up with conditions and cascades and everything. So we need those tables to be created in a certain order for us to be able to set up that foreign key. So if we're referencing Pokemon from the trainer, we need to make sure the Pokemon table exists before we set up the trainer. And usually, like, it kind of works out that you do it in that, or like, just naturally, I think the way you design and the way you think about things, you tend to think about them in that order of building those relationships. But sometimes you don't. And so the way to fix that would be to edit the file name. It kind of feels a bit clunky, but it actually it just works. So the other thing we can do, and this is what's really powerful, is that we can do migrate reset. And what this does now is it actually rolls everything back in order. So it does it in the reverse order, and it's calling these down functions. So it's really good if you just, like, it's so easy to screw up your database. So you can just very easily say, right, okay, get rid of anything, start again. And when we start looking at like seeding data, it makes it even more powerful. So that's so this is where, so as a kind of reminder, just go through it again. So we created our model using Artisan. So we did make model Pokemon -m, which not only made the model, the Pokemon class here, it also created the migration to create the table in the database so we can actually start putting things in there. Then we ran the migration using Artisan again. Well, after we actually came in here and set some properties for our model. And then we ran the migration and just went through these in order. So that's great. What is this Pokemon model all about? So this Pokemon class is the thing that we're going to be using in our application to access the Pokemon table and create new Pokemon, delete them and stuff. And it uses a thing called Eloquent, which we can see here. Its model is actually part of the Eloquent, in the Eloquent namespace essentially, or in the Eloquent folder. And Eloquent is Laravel's object relational mapping system, and it uses an active record design pattern. And what that means is this model class is responsible for interacting with the table of Pokemon, representing an individual row in the table, and actually managing its own persistence. And that might sound a bit much, but we're going to have a look what that means right now. So I'm actually, for the rest of this video, we're only going to be working in the terminal here. So I can make sure, yeah, you can see that. So we're going to be using something called Tinker, and Tinker is great. So again, it's an Artisan command. So what this actually is we can run Tinker, and we essentially have a live PHP command line, if you want. So we can do things. We can create models and play with our data and test it. And then once we're satisfied that's all working, we can move on to kind of like doing the more doing other stuff. So I want to we're going to be playing with the Pokemon. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to type use app Pokemon, and what that does is that pulls in, remember to end with a semicolon, that pulls in the Pokemon model. So now we can just use Pokemon and all of the methods in that class. The first thing I'm going to show you is get. So what get does is it does what it sounds like. It gets all of the Pokemon in the table. And so what it's done, it's created, at the moment there's none in there. And that's what I mean by this class is also used for like interacting with the table as well as being one itself. So let's create a Pokemon now. And I'm going to bring this up so we can remind ourselves what we need to set. So let's so we've got the Pokemon already. So I'm going to just put P1 equals a new Pokemon. Okay, and so now we've got a Pokemon there, but now we want to set some of the values. And yes, I have got a bunch of Pokemons here. So let's do a Charmander, shall we? P1 name equals Charmander. Okay, so I've given it the name. What else do we need? HP, so P1 HP equals 60 for a Charmander. And then we want the type, P1 type equals fire. Okay, there we go. So now everything in that Pokemon has been set. And now if we want to add that to our database, all we need to do is type P1 save. And now it's actually saved that to the database. So now if we do the Pokemon get, then we can see there's one Pokemon. And that's the power of this ORM system, is that we can use that one class, the Pokemon class, to do all those things. So what else can we do? Let's add a few more, just so we can. We've got a few to play with. So let's go. We'll do a new one. P2 equals new Pokemon, and then we want P2 name equals. Let's do Magikarp. So what else do we have? Name, HP, so HP 30, and then type is water. And then we're going to do P2 save again. So that one's in there. Should we do another one? Let's do another P3 equals new Pokemon. I want to get 3 so I can show you like some indexing and stuff. So name equals. Now we're going for some deep cuts here. I don't know how to pronounce this, so I'm not going to try. HP equals 130, and type is water again. And let's save. Okay, so now what we can do is let's do our Pokemon get. So now you can see we have 3 Pokemon in our table. Now, if you look, we're being told here that the type, what this is a collection. So what we can actually do is we can say like all Pokemon equals Pokemon get. Okay, and now we've actually, because we've put that in we've actually given that, we've assigned that to a variable, we can just access it like an array. And that's kind of, so that's it really. This is the whole idea of models and using this object relational mapping, is that we can, with this class, I can grab stuff from the database and it's all there, and I'm not writing any SQL, right? We can also do first, I think should work. I could be wrong here, I'm going off piste. There we go. So the first will get us just the first, just like, get first. And we can, what we'll be looking at in future videos is how to do quite complex queries using this class, and it's all done, and you don't have to write any SQL statements, which is really good and very powerful. And you can imagine now, we looked at our routing before, we can now actually send models as parameters, like whole models, and Laravel will do some clever stuff called model binding and figure out what parameters should go where. We can return, so this Pokemon array, we could return that along with a view, and actually then dynamically display all this information, and it's just an array. but we'll get onto that another time. So the next time probably we're going to be looking at seeding data. So at the moment you could see it was a bit of a pain for me to sit down and type out all these Pokemon. So what if we could do that automatically? And even better, what if we could randomly have 100 Pokemon? Then we could really test it. So thanks again for watching. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any videos you would like to see. See you later.